Welcome back to the Blueprint Collective, the place where we talk honestly about what it takes to run a modern practice in the A&E field. Today's guest is Sam Chestney, founder of VeuvHR and a longtime people and culture leader. In this episode, we talk about burnout, utilization, leadership pressure, and why technical brilliance doesn't automatically translate into leading people well. She also unpacks the 4 quadrants that leaders need today: emotional, social, adversity, and intellectual intelligence. This is an honest conversation about the human side of creative practices. Sam, welcome to the Blueprint Collective. I'm so glad you could join us today. So our listeners get to know you a little bit better. Can you give me a short rundown of your career and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me today. Delighted to be here and sharing a little bit about the industry. Yeah, look, I started my career, unfortunately, sadly, nearly 30 years ago. So probably labeling and self-professing as a bit of an HR dinosaur. Really seen a lot of change through that time from sort of a personnel stereotype where, the HR function was really very much of an administrative and operational reactive player in an organization, and really seen it evolve into being that true and trusted business partner. So it's really quite evolved in the last few years. My experience over that last sort of 30 years spanning has been across diverse industries and across diverse roles as well. I've been engaged in various modes of employment as a contractor, part-timer, permanent person, and now most recently as a consultant and founder of my business, which is known as VeuvHR, pretty new to market.
So you've worked across a lot of industries and the architecture and engineering field as well. Now that you're working outside, what are things that look completely different from when you're working inside practice?
Sure. So many things. I think, if I just think about specifically in architecture, engineering and construction, and in professional services and design, we're not just selling a product, we're selling human cognitive capacity and time. And this is where it gets a little bit more challenging in those industries because people are very much at the front and center of each of those industries. And what we see time and time again, particularly in those industries, is that aptitude or element of burnout and fatigue. I think when you're a consultant in other industries, there's an ability to come in, take pulse and immediately make those changes because the product opportunity is different.
Yeah. Do you think that the same kind of people problems happen across architecture and engineering, or are they slightly different?
I think they're very, very similar. There's diverse generations in each of the industries that we work within in this amazing world that we live in. I think people issues are everywhere you go and they're all relatively similar, but it's the way in which they're dealt with and addressed that makes the difference to the impact on productivity, but also the culture and retention in an organization.
What does dealing with it well kind of look like to you?
Time, Scott. It's always about dealing with it in a really timely manner. And everyone is so short of it. And, and particularly when you're on client projects and meeting client expectations in that architecture, engineering, construction realm, it's hard to carve out time because, again, time costs money to be able to deal with the issues effectively. So that would be my number one resolution outcome, is always deal with that in a timely manner.
You mentioned utilization. Let's talk a little bit about that. Most firms see utilization as a resourcing problem, like we don't have enough people or we have too many people. But to me, it feels like a little deeper. What do you think firms really struggle with utilization?
I don't think it's about we don't have enough people. There's tools, processes, systems, and proactive leadership to manage what I think I've seen as the core challenge in the industry. So if you think about that sector and that industry, firms are constantly struggling with over-servicing their clients. We are dealing with creatives here. So creatives are somewhat perfectionists. And we have to remember that we're dealing with those true creatives and highly technical minds. Their natural instinct is to perfect their work and to create beautiful spaces, beautiful designs, amazing places for community and country to absolutely leverage. So they want it to be flawless. But what happens in reality, and what I've seen, is we get led into unauthorized, out of scope iterations. Again, because they're creatives, stems from a place of passion and perfection. And the client hasn't actually agreed to pay for that. And that absolutely hammers utilization metrics. It calls for a stretch in resources and sometimes a stretch for capability as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What do genuinely disciplined practices do differently?
It's really defining the beautiful balance of enabling the outcomes for client and organization, but also enabling outcomes for self. So, really fostering that balance of, I don't know, maybe an 80-20 rule where we're really focused on the organization and the outcomes for the client. And 20% is a little bit selfish. It's around self enablement, it's about industry networking, it's about doing thought leadership stories so that we're continually learning, remaining abreast of trends, both in market, both in industry, both in organization. It's also about creating and managing your own career pathway. So being seen on LinkedIn, advocating for your own profile, advocating for the brand that you work within and that you feel proud of. It really stems from making sure there's that beautiful balance of the right creation for both employer and employee.
A lot of principals and studio leaders I see like physically look exhausted at the moment, especially here in Victoria. Has the industry normalized burnout to a point where we don't even see it anymore and we don't make space for that kind of other work that you've just been talking about?
I think it's definitely been normalized. And there's a stereotype, oh, if you work in construction industry and engineering, you're going to be doing long hours. Those organizations within those sectors are becoming increasingly apparent of the toll that it takes on people, not restricted to mental. It's also about the physical. It's also about the psychological. A lot of our organizations that we see now in that industry, in that sector, do have employee assistance programs, which is fabulous. They're focusing more on safety and making that an agenda at every meeting, at every toolbox talk. So I think that people are becoming better about the realistic, proposition that it does exist, burnout, mental fatigue, and they're talking about it more openly than they've ever done before. And there are fewer repercussions for being able to speak up as well now.
Yeah. Do you think leaders talk enough or talk honestly about the pressures that they're under, either amongst themselves in practice or with their teams? Like, do they express how difficult it is?
I think that that's up to the individual. There's still a lot of probably unassumed, discrimination on whether you are resilient enough to work in the industry and that potential label that you will get if you do share something. I think leaders are driven to be brave and courageous and hold that tone. So then, there's that level of vulnerability that you are sharing if you are pitching another story which looks different from that. In any HR textbook you read and with any lived experience, you'll always know that vulnerability is the absolute state of authenticity. And in order to be leading people and taking them on a journey, you need to be authentic. So I think if organizations adopt that very baseline old school philosophy of it's okay to be authentic, it's okay to be vulnerable, and you have a culture that fosters and promotes speaking up, then there's going to be more opportunity to do that safely without people fearing repercussions or any different treatment or missing out on a project because, you demonstrated that you weren't so resilient or capable to handle the previous one. I think you need to meet people in the moment, really listen. And, the more and more I work with leaders, I'm seeing, particularly in this industry, I'm seeing that they're promoted into these leadership roles because they have the technical brilliance and creativity to meet the client's needs, meet the organization needs. But the question still remains, are they emotionally intelligent enough to empathize with the diversity, the generational diversity, and the expectations of those generations in our current workforce?
100% agree with you on that one. What is missing in that transition from technical brilliance to leadership in practice today?
Asking questions, not making assumptions, and listening. Many times I have seen, again, referring back to the industries that we're speaking about, technical brilliance being confused, misunderstood, or misinterpreted for wanting to be a leader and moving away from tools. It's left brain versus right brain transition there. We need to ask our people, where do you want to be? What are your passions? What are your aspirations? They don't always want to progress in a career ladder that is necessarily vertical. Sometimes they want to zigzag. Sometimes they want to take a sidestep. It's about project experience for them and the diversity of projects and the ability to use different software platforms and meet with different sectors and clients, e.g. government, e.g. transport, hospitality, health, wherever it may be. We often make assumptions that people want to get to the top as quick as they can. That's not the case. We need to ask more questions and listen very actively before we go about promoting. And I've actually experienced that several times in this industry where people have gone into roles and been promoted and the leaders have said, why aren't they grateful? We've just given you some amazing promotion. Oh, because they didn't ask for it.
What do you think is the difference or the core kind of skill set that you need to move from someone who delivers projects really well to someone who can lead people in a team really well, if you choose that's your path?
I think if we look at where the future of work is heading and where technology is really having quite a prevalent space in how we work, ways of working, and how we show up, I think one of the core skills for our leaders and areas of competence is definitely around that the four quadrants of intelligence, which is the adversity intelligence or adversity quotient, emotional quotient, social quotient, and then of course intellectual quotient. Having the balance of all four of those is key to be able to lead people, take them on a journey, be visionary, be articulate, have exceptional communication and interpersonal skills to be able to relate to people, to truly understand what it is that they want out of their role, what motivates them, what excites them, help them understand where their level of self-awareness is, where their barriers are, and what great looks like.
You mentioned before there's 6 generations in the workplace right now, and we've chatted before and you've said 6 generations, one size fits none. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that and what you see is the biggest disconnect between the generations at the moment?
That's a really big question because of the generational differences. Let me start with, old school versus new school. So old school look like I'm grateful for a job. I'm excited to be working in a company. I could be promoted in 3 years. I'll just beaver away quietly. I'll do my hours and I won't ask for anything and everything is appreciated. Okay, fast forward, new generation. We want timely feedback. We want it as much as possible, always. We want to be working on the latest gadgets, gizmos, and platforms. We want to have loads of perks. We want to have flexible working. We want to go to the gym. We want to have food provided for us. And guess what? I want to be a CEO in 5 years' time. So I think we've gone from moving with pace, being really thoughtful, to a very technologically driven, social media focused. I can see what my friend's doing and he or she gets to go to the gym on Fridays at lunchtime. Their employer does this. Why don't we do this? To a very competitive landscape and a very diverse workplace where there is a one size fits none, as I always use, and being able to accommodate and really understand how we create a unique and personalized experience for every single person that walks into that door. It's challenging. It's very difficult. But again, the more we have engagement surveys and we ask questions and we do those toolbox talks and we do the one-to-ones, we do walk and talks, whatever works for the business, it's about remaining engaged, having that level of human and social connection. Hi, how was your weekend? What have you got on your plate this week? What can I help with? It's really, really simple. I don't know how it's been lost and forgotten. I don't know whether we all got too busy or we rely too much on gadgets. We've seen this emerging of AI and where it fits. And I'm saying it needs to fit in a sandwich, human first, AI in the middle, end with human. So if you think about it, that human touch should never, ever be replaced. We should always be reaching out. We should always be looking to understand people's intrinsic motivation, what makes them, bounce and leap out of bed each day, and then being able to leverage that motivation and that energy, play to their strengths and use them in the right way in a business.
Yeah, that's so good. There's so much to unpack in that. I'm going to stick to the hot topic of the moment and ask you a question about your views on AI. I love that sandwich analogy. Do you think firms are approaching AI as a way to build more sustainable workplaces or just as another way to squeeze out more output?
I think a bit of column A and a bit of column B, Scott. I had the opportunity going to a business earlier this week to understand where and how they're using AI, and I literally fell off the chair. I was very wowed by what they could do with AI, and they spoke very openly about being able to reduce 1.5 headcount, with AI being a solution to what they're looking for with writing reports, dealing with presentations, etc. I think every organization needs to have an AI co-mindset. So being able to do what they've always done well, but embrace AI as an administrative unburdening tool, which then allows automation with, things like routine documentation, position descriptions, whatever it be, reports, policy development, drafting, basic calculations. We just need to be careful that we don't let it take over what it is that we're trying to get across in terms of the personalized approach. We can free up cognitive space used for strategic planning and client relationship management for businesses through AI, but it has its place. And I think if you have that sandwich mindset, you'll always be very careful how much you use AI and when and where you use it.
So if AI removes a lot of that grunt work that traditionally junior staff have learned through, what do you think is going to happen to their development?
I think their development is a lateral landscape. There's plenty of opportunity to learn new things and embrace change. I think AI is here to stay. I know AI is here to stay. So it's understanding where their other capability skill set is and allowing, as I mentioned earlier, room for investment in their development and growth so that we can take them on a different pathway, introduce them to new ways of thinking, new ways of working. It's our job as leaders to foster care and nurture people in those more junior levels like we would a family member. Our role at work is to, somewhat put on a mum and dad hat and take them on a different journey and show them the way. They are new. They don't always have visibility to what an organization's vision is and what a strategy is. So again, through that one-to-one connection and the walk and talks and the, formality of performance reviews and development reviews is really tapping into understanding what it is they're doing, what they like, playing to their strengths, developing any deficiencies as well, and then taking them on a career trajectory that way. AI should not be intimidating. We need to be embracing it. But again, it's about knowing where it fits and how it fits.
Yeah, awesome. What do you think we need to be teaching younger staff today that we didn't necessarily think about or need to teach kind of like 5 years ago?
So many answers to that. I don't have young kids, but I certainly have 2 daughters in their mid to late 20s. So I feel like sometimes they're my test dummies. I think, eye contact, as simple as this sounds, Scott, eye contact is important. We find certain generations buried in social media and buried in phones. A little bit lost is the art of communication, is really engaging with people. Active listening is really, really important. Having the confidence and emotional intelligence to read the room, ask the right questions at the right time, and be brave. I always say to anyone that I'm, coaching, or if I'm in a facilitation environment, there's no silly question. Ask the questions, be brave, be courageous. I think a lot of our generations now will revert to Gemini to ask the question rather than have a face-to-face interaction. They will scroll and post and like and comment before they actually go and say to someone, "Hey, that was really great what you just did there. That was awesome." And they probably sit two seats away from them.
Yeah.
But they'd rather do it on LinkedIn because it's an easier way. I think we need to get back to having real conversations.
That's a great point. Totally agree with you on that one. I even catch myself doing it at times when I could have just got out of my seat and gone and spoke to someone instead of just sending them a Slack or like a Teams message. And yeah, that kind of makes me think about how as leaders as well, we kind of take the easy road out of difficult conversations a lot of the time. Do you have any guidance around good hints and tips for having hard conversations?
Absolutely. Conversations in the workplace are getting harder because we have the diverse generations and we just have different types of workers as well. We have people that are neurodiverse that have a different way of thinking and a different preference for the way they work. We have a significant population of LGBTQI+. We have people that have different expectations around their modes of employment, hybrid, remote, come to the office. And we have people that have different needs. So some people prefer to be behind a screen, and some people have the opportunity that they need social connectedness, so they need to be around people all the time. I think when tailoring conversations, back to the question, is always really actively listening. I use the saying often when I'm coaching people, there's a reason why we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. The idea behind that is to listen more and to speak less. And I think the art of conversation and coaching and walking away with a motivational, I feel really good about the conversation that I have. I know where I am, got clarity. I felt safe. It's the big one, psychosocial safety. I feel safe about what we just discussed. Is all about listening first, being able to respond, re-clarifying, also delving, again, via reading the room. Is this person or individual going through something else that maybe I don't know about? We call that mitigating circumstances. We call that contextual considerations, lots of terminology around that. Tap in a little bit more. Try and pivot to how are things going? How's home? Like delve into personal, but be very careful around that. But understand what is going on around them, because we're trying to bring our whole self to work, which is a combination of what's going on at home, but also how I need to front up at work. Tapping into that is really, really important.
Yeah. What are conversations that leaders should be having with their teams, but they might be avoiding that you see?
Feedback around performance, definitely. Performance and probably conduct. I think the way that, Fair Work Australia, which is our legislative framework, is designed is probably more so in favour of the employee. So I think employees are very cautious of how to converse with people, when to send notifications about either a conversation that's probably quite informal or a conversation that needs to be had because it is something to do with the way they've behaved or the way in which they've engaged with a client potentially. Leaders need to be ensuring that they have facts and that they've gathered the facts so that they can have a conversation that is going to enable the right outcome. Again, emotional intelligence comes into play quite significantly here. It's knowing what to say at the right time, what to offer. Example, EAP, you don't want to remove your own or abrogate from your own duties, but there are other portals that we need to offer to staff to make sure that they feel that they're being heard. But I think leaders, first and foremost, need to be very aware of, how they're showing up, where they're creating the environment to have that conversation, which is undisturbed, respectful, private, etc.
Yeah. It's always such a mode shift for new leaders to be able to be like, you need to give that kind of almost immediate feedback when things don't necessarily go the right way or when they do, so that it's expressed at the time.
Well, we're in high stakes delivery environments. So, that lack of psychological safety isn't just an HR issue. It's critical to delivering the commercial and physical opportunities, and it can present significant risk. So if a team member is too afraid of speaking up or the repercussions to flag, a design flaw or a budget blowout or a safety concern, the entire business ends up being exposed somewhat, or the impact then hits other team members, which then impacts productivity. It's a vicious cycle.
In my experience, it kind of goes out the window when pressure hits the firm. What are your thoughts around that? And how do we manage psychosocial safety better?
I think from the lived experience I have had in the industry, it's about dismantling this hero culture and challenging their perceived and somewhat real industry norm, which is working 70 hours a week or pulling that all-night session is going to get you the promotion and the client's going to be ecstatic. There's no guarantee in any of that. We know that absolutely. Other people will do that hero behavior because they need the badge of honor. We need to hold leaders accountable for chronic overwork within their teams. We need to challenge them on how they're leading, how they're managing in terms of proactive planning, time management, client expectations. And you can't then frame it as a failure of your team around the project planning and the resource allocation versus an employee's dedication. I have worked in this industry and seen this kind of clock watching mentality still occurring. For me, that's a huge red flag. It's never been about how many hours you put in. Again, we've got creatives, they're striving for perfection, and leaders have to actively reward where they're at and what they're doing and how they're doing it. They also need to be there to advocate with them. So if you've got a team member who you know is working regularly over time, how do you feel when you're walking out the door as a leader and saying, have a great evening, thanks again for all of your dedication, I'm off to have dinner with my family or off to go out or whatever it is?
Yeah. I always think that as an industry, we rely too heavily on that kind of unpaid emotional labor. And yeah, I really hope that as we progress, that dissipates.
Absolutely. We do it to ourselves, though. I've absolutely seen that hero culture be quite contagious in amongst teams. And it's the leaders' role modeling that will differentiate between which team remains back and does that hero culture behavior versus.
Yeah, I agree. What is something in the industry that's giving you a lot of optimism right now?
What's giving me optimism about the industry at the moment is the design, creation, government support around creating better places for Australians to live, work, play, breathe. I think there's a lot of organisations fostering climate sustainability, getting kids outdoors, creating play areas to enable families to really spend time outdoors, create opportunities to connect with their children away from screens, away from chores and away from sport, and spend real time to get to know one another and have a real pulse on that. I think there's always greater opportunity to get people living outdoors. And I think the industry really facilitates the opportunity for people to have better places. And at the end of the day, we're all here, hopefully, to leave a legacy behind of creating a better planet. I know I am, which is why I do what I do. I'm here to create better workplaces and a better planet overall. And I think that the architecture industry and engineering construction really facilitates that.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. It's a beautiful industry most of the time. Sam, if people want to connect with you, where should they go?
Sure. I'm available on all gadgets and devices. LinkedIn is a great form of connection, but I also have a website where we can connect at www.veuvhr.com.au.
That was Sam Chestney from VeuvHR. I really enjoyed this conversation, particularly Sam's thoughts around vulnerability, leadership, authenticity, and the need for leaders to develop more than just technical capability. Her frameworks around emotional, social, adversity, and intellectual intelligence feels especially relevant as our industry navigates burnout and the generational change alongside AI developments. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share it with someone in the industry. If you'd like to connect with Sam, you can connect through LinkedIn or VeuvHR, and we'll link in the notes below. Thanks for listening to the Blueprint Collective.